Well, hello everyone. It's a beautiful 77-degree day here in Tennessee, and I wanted to do a video today because it's just so pretty out here. I've had several questions about miniature Phalenopsis orchids and how I grow them. So I thought I would go ahead and go through that with you today and do an update on some that I did some repotting videos back in the spring and in the fall. As you see, location is very, very important for miniature Phalenopsis orchids. I have mine growing here in front of this door, this glass door that receives morning sunlight all morning long, from sunup until about noon. And then it's about 4 o'clock right now. So as you see, they're even receiving some dispersed afternoon sunlight. They really need a lot of sunlight to grow and to bloom, as they should. When they're growing up in the canopy in the jungle, they're growing high up in the trees. The regular size phals are lower in the canopy than these are. So they receive a lot more light than regular Phalenopsis orchids, and also they receive more moisture. So I keep that in mind as I'm growing mine. So let me tell you how I water and fertilize these as well. Okay, all of these are growing in New Zealand sphagnum moss. Almost all of my miniature Phalenopsis orchids are. There's just one that is growing in very small orchiata bark, and it had been growing in bark for about 2 years before then. So I wanted to go ahead and keep that one in bark, but these are all in New Zealand sphagnum moss, and I have them throughout my house as well. So when I go to water these, it's very, very easy. What I do is I just kind of touch the top of the moss, and if it starts feeling like it's getting dry and crunchy, and if the pot feels very, very lightweight, then I know it's time to water that one. I don't really let my miniature Phalenopsis roots go silver like I do with my regular size Phalenopsis. They do like more water than a regular size Phalenopsis. So most of these, the ones in the smaller pots, they usually get watered this time of the year. It's late winter, or today is definitely an early spring type of a day. But for about the past month, I've been watering these every 4 or 5 days. In the summertime, I might do it a little bit more often. It just depends on the weather. So you just kind of have to check on them pretty often. And the size of the pot really makes a big difference when you're watering in moss. If you've got a big old pot of moss, that moss is going to hold water for a long time. If it's in a smaller pot like this, not quite as long. So let's say this one I usually water about every 5 days. And this is Buddy, and he's in a much bigger container, and he gets watered about every 7 days. But I do check them really often to see when they need to be watered. And several of you have asked me how I fertilize these. I fertilize all of my orchids pretty much the same. All of my Phalenopsis orchids, I should say, the same, whether they are growing in waterculture or moss or in bark. So I'm going to put a link to a video in the description box about how I fertilize these. I fertilize these usually about 3 times a month. The moss really retains nutrients and water really, really well. So sometimes it just depends on how they're growing. If they're growing really quickly, then what I'll do is I'll fertilize them 2 times in a row, and then that 3rd time I'll just run some clear water through them. That seems to really, really work well with these. Another question that I wanted to answer is, what is my favorite media to grow miniature Phalenopsis orchids in? That's easy. The New Zealand sphagnum moss, definitely. They just do so very well. I tried some miniatures in watercolture and it just didn't work. They just did not do well in watercolture. And Buddy Orchid here on the right, I did several videos about when I converted him from watercolture into the New Zealand sphagnum moss. He has just taken off since then and bloomed beautifully, and he's got a beautiful root system. These orchids do very, very well in New Zealand sphagnum moss. So I highly recommend this medium for miniature Phalenopsis orchids. Now let me go through some individual plants and just tell you how long they have been in New Zealand sphagnum moss. And if I have a repotting video on these, I will put that in the description box as well. And this is Soho Vivian. And I bought her back in October and brought her home, put her in New Zealand sphagnum moss immediately. She had this horrible foamy moss plug. And look at this, she is already reblooming off of this spike that she had when I bought her. So she's got secondary spike plus some branching going on there. So she's very happy in this moss. And here is Buddy Fowl, and you all know this is one of my favorite orchids. I love this miniature. And as you see, this one is spiking again. Cannot wait to show you a new spike of flowers from Buddy Fowl. And he has been in New Zealand sphagnum moss for almost 2 years, and you can just see he just glows. He's so healthy. And several of you have asked me about this orchid. This is my little Maggie. I named her that because she was so magnesium deficient when I first got her that all of her leaves were just purple. Came home, I bought this one for $2. Brought it home, put it in New Zealand sphagnum moss, and look, she has increased, let's see, she has increased in size, she's doubled in size since May. So boy, this little orchid has really outdone itself. This is a little violet colored miniature. It's absolutely gorgeous. I bought this one for, I believe, $4, and I did a repotting video on this one as well. And look at the new leaf that came out on this pretty little miniature. So she's doing very well in the moss as well. And here is a miniature that I bought at the end of October, and I went ahead and repotted it. It was in a horrible moss plug, and it has just, well, as you see, it's getting a new leaf, and it's just really, really done well. It's got these 2 spikes that did not turn brown, so I'm expecting some secondary spikes here pretty soon. And here's my little Intensity Mini. I think this one is just so beautiful. As you see, this one is in bloom, and I had this one in full watercolture for about 6 months. It just didn't do anything at all. I put this one in New Zealand sphagnum moss about 1.5 years ago, and it took off, and I will show you the root system of this little orchid. Oh wow, let me show you the foliage first. Look at this new leaf that she grew in the New Zealand sphagnum moss. She is getting another leaf, I just noticed, and I cannot keep this one in the right size pot. It just keeps growing. Every time I put it in a bigger pot, the roots just keep growing down to the bottom of it. I started her off in one of those little short cups, and then a few months later, I had to put her in a larger cup. I just took some more New Zealand sphagnum moss, rehydrated it, and I just filled in down at the bottom of the cup. And now the roots are growing down into this cup that's full of some charcoal. So yeah, I'm gonna have to repot this one in a few months into a bigger pot. So after she quits blooming, she goes into a new, bigger home. And this is the last miniature I'm going to show you. This is my little star orchid. For those of you who have been watching my channel for a while, you will remember that I had this one in water culture for a while, and I didn't think that it was going to make it. If you'll look at the rest of the plant, you'll see what I'm saying. Do you see this short little leaf here? The plant just declined quite a bit in water culture. And look at the top of this plant. Look at what has grown since I put it down in the New Zealand sphagnum moss. And it is spiking. And this is the spike. Very nice little spike of flowers. So it will be in bloom here really, really soon. So this story ended very, very well for this little plant. And last but not least, here is my little DTPS, Sohogotris Flora Arc. And this is the only one that is growing in bark. And it is growing in the very small Orchiata bark, and it really likes it. So let me show you what that looks like. Well, that's actually easier said than done. As you see, the plant looks really, really good. And that cup is full of roots, and wow, does she ever have a lot of air roots. So yeah, I am watering those air roots about every other day. I just rinse them off in water until they turn green and really let them hydrate well. So thank you all for going on my miniature Phalenopsis tips and tour with me today. And you all just have a fabulous day and be highly favored, deeply loved, and greatly blessed. And we'll talk to you all next time.